So, if you're a developer, you've definitely heard of design patterns. But let's be honest, has learning them ever made your code, well, more complicated? Today, we're going to fix that. We're going to dive into how to truly think in design patterns, using insights from that legendary Gang of Four book to build the right mental model from the ground up.
You remember that feeling, right? You've just discovered design patterns, and it's like someone handed you the secret keys to the kingdom of software architecture. You're seeing singletons, factories, and observers, and suddenly you feel like you can build truly elegant, reusable, and solid software. It's an amazing feeling.
But then something weird happens. You start putting these patterns into practice, and your code, it doesn't really get simpler. In fact, it gets more complex, it's harder to read, maybe it even breaks more easily. So what's going on? You've got the best tools, but you're somehow building a mess. Well, if this has happened to you, you're not alone. This is an incredibly common experience, and it actually has a name.
Welcome to the pattern paradox. It's that tricky, frustrating spot where we get our hands on these amazing solutions, and our first instinct is to use them absolutely everywhere. But that often leads to code that's the complete opposite of what we were aiming for.
Does any of this sound familiar? You find yourself adding all this unnecessary complexity just because you saw a chance to shoehorn in a pattern. You over-engineer a simple feature, using a pattern way before you actually need that flexibility. And what you get is code that's just a pain to read. Worst of all, you might even create a tightly coupled system by mistake, which is the very thing patterns are supposed to prevent. Now, this isn't a problem with the patterns, it's a problem with how we're thinking about them.
All right, so let's just hit the reset button for a second. The absolute most critical thing you need to unlearn is this. Design patterns are not blocks of code that you just copy and paste. They are something much more abstract, and because of that, much more powerful.
The original authors, the Gang of Four, they put it perfectly. A pattern is like a template. It's an idea, right? It's a piece of design wisdom that's been captured. It's not a code snippet. The same exact pattern can be implemented a dozen different ways, depending on your language and the specific problem you're solving.
Here is the absolute best way to think about this. A lot of us start out treating patterns like a recipe. You follow these exact steps with these exact ingredients and you'll get a cake every time. That is the wrong model. A design pattern is a blueprint. It shows you the structure, the rooms, the relationship between them, but it doesn't tell you what color to paint the walls. It requires you to understand and adapt, not just copy and paste. So this leads us to the single most important mental shift you can possibly make. To use patterns like a real expert, you have to stop thinking about the patterns and start thinking about your problems.
This is the thought process of the novice. You got a shiny new hammer, we'll call it the factory pattern, and you're running around looking for anything that even remotely looks like a nail. This is a direct path to over-engineering because you're forcing a solution on a situation that might not even have a problem to begin with.
Now here is the expert's mindset. You start by clearly identifying the problem you actually have. Something like, okay, my system has this recurring issue with creating complex objects in a flexible way. Only then do you reach into your toolkit and ask, all right, what's the right tool for this specific job? And notice that crucial little addition, if any. That's huge, because sometimes the simplest solution is no pattern at all.
Okay, so if patterns aren't just code, how in the world are you supposed to learn them well enough to use them correctly? Well, you deconstruct them. The Gang of Four gave us a really consistent structure for every single pattern, and getting a handle on this structure is your key to unlocking their true power.
You can really understand any pattern by looking at a few key things. First, the problem. What specific, recurring issue does this thing solve? Second, the solution. What's the abstract design of classes and objects that forms the blueprint? Third, and this is the one people always seem to forget, the consequences. What are the trade-offs? What do you gain and what might you lose in performance or complexity? And finally, the name, which gives us this amazing shared vocabulary to talk about complex ideas really fast.
So here's a pro tip. Whenever you're studying a new pattern, or maybe you're looking for one to solve your problem, always start with its intent. Think of it as the one-line summary. It is the pure signal. If that intent doesn't perfectly match the problem you're facing, you're probably barking up the wrong tree.
Okay, so we've covered the theory. Now let's talk about what this actually looks like in the real world, day to day. This is the kind of wisdom that really separates the pros from the beginners.
First off, please do not try to memorize all 23 patterns from the book. That is a recipe for disaster. The goal here is to build an intuition by focusing on that mapping between a problem and its solution. It helps to learn them in their three big categories: creational, structural, and behavioral, just to get a sense of how they relate. Honestly, the best way to learn is to revisit them just in time when you run into a problem in your own code that starts to feel familiar.
And here it is. This is the golden rule, the ultimate guardrail that will protect you from over-engineering. Read it and then read it again. If you do not need the flexibility a pattern gives you right now, you probably shouldn't use it. Adding a pattern to solve a future problem that might never even happen is called premature abstraction, and it is a major cause of complex, hard-to-maintain code. Let's walk through a quick, concrete example. Here's our problem. Our e-commerce app needs to support different ways to pay: credit card, PayPal, maybe crypto down the line. We want to be able to add new methods or switch between them without having to rewrite our whole checkout flow. So the core of the problem here is managing interchangeable algorithms.
So, with that problem crystal clear in our minds, we scan the intent sections of our patterns, and then we see it, the strategy pattern. Just listen to the language. It's an almost perfect mirror. Our problem is interchangeable algorithms. Its intent is to define a family of algorithms and make them interchangeable. That is the aha moment we're looking for. See what happened there? We didn't start by saying, let's use strategy here. We started with a problem, and it led us directly to the perfect tool for the job.
All right, to bring this all home, let's distill this down to a first principle, a core mindset that you can take with you into your very next line of code.
Let's just recap these key takeaways. Patterns are blueprints. They're not recipes. Always start with a problem, then look for a pattern, if one is even needed. Make sure you understand a pattern's intent and its consequences before you even think about using it. And remember, the goal here is clear, maintainable code, not just showing off how many patterns you know.
And that's where we'll leave it. I want you to take this question back to your own work. Don't ask what pattern you can use today. Instead, look at your codebase and ask yourself, what is the most painful, recurring design problem that I'm facing right now? Start there, and you'll be on the right path to using design patterns with wisdom and with precision.